Today's video will focus on nozzle selection for broadcast herbicide applications. We'll be joined by one of our extension agronomists, Dr. Josh McGinty, to speak about nozzle selection, their spray patterns, a little bit about drift mitigation, and maintenance. Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service does not endorse any products shown in our videos. These products are shown for educational purposes only to demonstrate available products on the market.
Hello, my name is Josh McGinty. I serve as extension agronomist for field crops and forage crops in South Texas, based in Corpus Christi. Nozzles, meaning your spray tips, are some of the cheapest parts of your application equipment. Guess that kind of depends on how many nozzles you have, but really you're looking at $4, $5, $6, $7 a piece. Fairly inexpensive components, but they do greatly influence your spray coverage. They influence your the accuracy of your spray, knowing the nozzle tip and the appropriate pressures that it should run at. And the big thing that I focus on is the driftability of the spray, so the sensitivity of your spray application to move off-site. Nozzles play a big role there. So I want to start with just talking a little bit about the basics of a spray nozzle, what they do, the design, how to interpret these numbers and letters on a spray nozzle. These are flat fan nozzles, meaning both of these are designed to be used in a boom in conjunction with neighboring nozzles. They put out basically a long oval type spray pattern on the ground, and they're meant to overlap with one another. So the spray pattern tapers off at the edges. That would match up with the tapering edge of the adjacent nozzle. Typically we recommend 15, 20, 25% overlap between these so that you get a nice uniform deposition along the spray boom. There's a lot of different types out there, and you have to become a little well versed in what these numbers all mean. And so I'm looking at one right here. This is a T-Jet brand nozzle, and it says in fine print 8002 VS. Here's another one. This is a TTI 11002. So what do those numbers mean? When you look at these, those first digits, so the 80 or the 110 in this case, that tells you the spray angle of the tip. So this 80-degree tip is going to produce a spray plume that's about 80 degrees wide if it's run at the right pressure. This 110 will produce a wider spray plume at that operating pressure. The difference in these two as it relates to us as applicators is that wider angle tip is one that I can actually get closer to the ground. I can run my boom lower because it sprays a wider angle, so I can maintain my overlap and keep that boom down low. With the 110 or a 120 degree tip, I can have my boom down at 12 to 14 inches above the ground and still get good overlap. Whereas an 80-degree tip, that might need to be closer to 20, 24 inches because of that narrower spray plume. So as you're going along your spray equipment, looking at it in the spring, getting it ready for the season, one thing you need to do is make sure you at least have the same spray angle in all of those nozzles, meaning we can have nice uniform deposition along the boom. The other thing we need to check are the preceding digits. So these are both O2s. And one good thing about the spray industry is that most, if not all, of the nozzle manufacturers now have gotten on the same page with coloring their tips based on the size of the tip. So these are both O2s, 8002, 11002. They're both yellow. Okay, that's become more or less an industry standard. If these were blue, they would be O3s. If they were O25s, kind of a mid-range size, they'd be purples. There's greens and browns and grays. There's all different colors, and those just tell you the size of the tip and thus the flow rating. So what that actually means when I say O2, that's a reference to a very well-established industry standard, and that is that this nozzle, when it's factory fresh and within specs, should flow 0.2 of a gallon per minute when operated at 40 psi. If I move to an 04 size tip, that would be 0.4 of a gallon per minute at 40 psi. That's really useful as you're calibrating a sprayer and maybe moving your spray output from one to another. So if I was going to go from, say, 10 GPA to 20 GPA in my sprayer, if I've already been calibrated for 10 with my O2s, I can just swap these out, put red nozzles in, those would be O4s, bring my pressure back to where I was running the O2s, and I'm going to be effectively double my output. I'll be at 20 GPA. We still need to check that with the calibration, but that can get you right in the neighborhood where you need to be. So the other things we need to look at are, when it comes to nozzle design, the spray orifice, so the hole that the solution comes out of. We've got a couple different designs here. We've got a stainless steel orifice in this tip, and we have a fully plastic design with the TTI. You'll also see brass nozzles. You'll also see some ceramic nozzles. There's not really a best for every application. I would just say, you know, if you're dealing with probably range and pasture where you're going over rough ground, occasionally that boom is hitting the ground or hitting brush, the metal nozzles are probably going to be better for you, especially the stainless steel. That can take a lot of physical damage before they truly become damaged. The plastic designs or the fully nylon designs, these actually last longer as long as you're not mechanically damaging them, because as you spray over time, you do have some erosion of these nozzles. The plastic actually holds up better to that erosion of the spray coming through, but these are pretty soft. So if I do slap this boom into some brush or I hit it on the ground because of some uneven terrain, this gets deformed pretty easily, and that's going to change your spray pattern. The ceramic tips are even tougher than the stainless steel. I would say brass, and there's not that many brass nozzles anymore. Brass is probably going to be at the bottom end of the spectrum for both issues of wear. So erosion of the nozzle orifice, brass is pretty soft, that happens pretty fast, and also brass is soft against mechanical damage. But like I said, brass is becoming less and less common out there. Another thing I like to talk about, we're talking nozzles. When you're pulling these out in the spring, of course, we're checking to make sure we have the same orifice size, so the same color of tips, that we have the same spray angle of tips along that boom. We need to check that they're all the same model, but then we also need to do an output test just to verify that all those nozzles are putting out a uniform output. And that's pretty simple. We just fill the sprayer up with clean water and do a timed catch on each nozzle along the boom. It could be for 10 seconds, it could be for 30 seconds, it could be for a minute. It doesn't really matter. Just do the same on every nozzle. And if we have a single nozzle that comes out more than about 10% over or under the average for the boom, that's a nozzle that needs to be changed out. If I've got 2 or 3 nozzles that are varying more than that 10%, I probably need to change out every nozzle on the boom. Okay, if you have nozzles that have a very uneven or stripy spray pattern, that's an indicator that you have something lodged inside that nozzle. So a little piece of sand, some other debris. The best way to clean those out is with a nylon bristle brush, something soft like this. This is made for cleaning spray nozzles. You could do this with an old toothbrush as well. I would just recommend against using baling wire, a pocket knife, things like that. That's going to damage that spray orifice. And also, do not just blow air through it. Okay, we don't want to have residual spray solution coming back and potentially getting into our mouth. So just a soft bristle brush, gently dislodge whatever's stuck in that orifice, and then we can run that under some clean water to wash it out. Okay, going back to these two nozzles, these are drastically different from one another. And as it relates to spray drift, these are on very opposite ends of the spectrum. So this XR nozzle is just a plain flat fan, very standard for what you're going to see outfitted in a lot of sprayers as you buy them off the lot. This gives you excellent coverage, but it also puts out a lot of very fine droplets. So coverage and the driftability of the spray are kind of related. Fortunately, in range and pasture, we're using a lot of systemic herbicides, so once they get on the plant, they get into the vascular system of the plant and they move. So coverage is less of an issue with what we're going to use in this arena of agriculture. For contact herbicides, stuff like Gramoxone or Liberty, these are herbicides that land on the leaf, and wherever that droplet is, that's where it does its job. They don't move in the plant. Coverage is very important for those. So you have to think about what you're spraying, what you need in terms of coverage. But I would say, you know, these flat fans, this XR in this case, is going to be very fine spray, very driftable. These are very small droplets. Versus something like this. This is that T-Jet TTI. This is an air induction nozzle. It's got some other technology in it in terms of 2 orifices basically. But this puts out a much larger droplet. And we've actually measured these in a low-speed wind tunnel to quantify this. The droplet coming out of this nozzle, when it's operated at the same pressure as this one, is going to be about 6 to 7 times larger, meaning that's a heavier droplet, meaning it's going to get from the nozzle to the ground faster. That droplet retains its speed, it's got a lot of mass, so once it gets to the target, it's safe. It's this time when it's in the air, the airborne portion, that we worry about spray drift. Whereas a little 100 micron droplet coming out of this flat fan is going to take some time to reach the ground. It's got some hang time. It loses speed very quickly after it comes out of the nozzle, so it's going to tend to move sideways as we have an air current out there. So one of the things we do to demonstrate the difference between these is using water-sensitive paper. We did this a few minutes ago where I ran both of these nozzles, so very fine and ultra coarse ends of the spectrum, operated at the same pressure, in a single spray wand calibrated for 15 GPa. So we're putting out the same output, but when we put it over the top of this water sensitive paper, we can get a rough idea of the droplet size. And so everywhere the droplets hit this yellow paper, it turns it blue. And you notice we have a lot of coverage on this. This is good if we were using a contact type herbicide. We need to cover as much of that leaf as we can. You also notice in between the spray droplets, the dark blue, that yellow paper in the background has kind of a blue tint to it because there's a lot of aerosols impacting that paper, changing the color. So this is very, very fine. Again, good for coverage, not so good for spray drift. And if I compare that to our TTI nozzle, so this is the same output. We're putting out 15 gallons per acre on both of these nozzles. We're running these at 38 psi. I'm applying at 3 mph speed. You notice a huge difference in the coverage, so we don't have as good a coverage here. But again, if I'm spraying a auxinic herbicide like 2,4-D, like aminopyrrolid, like dicamba, I'm not as worried about coverage. These herbicides will move in the plant. They are systemic. So I don't have as good a coverage, but I can tell you these droplets, like I said, are going to be 6 to 7x the size of these droplets. They weigh a lot more. They get to the target much faster, thus they're not going to drift as far. The difference in drift, doing something like this in the field next to a sensitive crop on a day like this, we've got, you know, probably 8-mile-an-hour winds. It's very easy to see this type of spray move 50 yards or more, whereas this is going to stay inside of 10, 12 feet a lot of times. So a big difference in the spray drift, big difference in coverage. So weigh that with what the herbicide or pesticide that you're applying is requiring. But you know, going back to what I started with, I mean, one of the simplest and cheapest things in your sprayer actually has the biggest impact on your droplet size and your driftability. One last thing. Outside of changing nozzles, if you want to make your spray less driftable, there's a few things we can do. We can decrease our operating pressure. So as we decrease operating pressure, we produce larger droplets with a given nozzle. If we increase, we produce more fines. So you can decrease your operating pressure, which means we're going to have to change our speed if we want to maintain the same output. So you're going to have to recalibrate the sprayer. But we can do that very simply and modify our droplet size in a pretty significant way without changing anything. If you have an assortment of tips available to you already, of course we could go to a larger orifice size nozzle within the same model. The bigger that hole in the nozzle is, the bigger the droplets will be produced. We have to watch it a little bit when we do that because we want to stay within the operating pressure range of those nozzles. So there is a lower and upper limit to these. So if we just go to a 3x size tip, we may not be able to operate that at the right pressure and be able to put out the output that we want. The other thing we can do is put a drift retardant in the tank. We've tested these in a wind tunnel. These are products that they're liquid products that you add to the spray tank that change the viscosity of that solution and can modify droplet size. They do work. They do work in a way that we can detect in a controlled environment. However, they're not silver bullets. Okay, they're not going to be miracle makers. So if you've got a very driftable spray tip and you're running high pressures, simply putting a retardant in the tank is not going to magically make this a safe spray. It'll gain you maybe on the order of 5 to 10% on your droplet size. But really, if you want to drastically make big significant changes to your droplet size and your driftability, that's going to involve a spray tip change, either to a bigger orifice or a different model. But the drift retardants can be added to give yourself a little bit of an extra advantage in reducing that spray drift.
If you have any questions, please reach out to your local county extension agent or feel free to contact Dr. Josh McGinty or myself. This has been Dr. Stacy Hines with RangeDecisions. Until next time.